Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. Another one back to back. It's been a couple of months since I've done this, but it's I'm always excited because I get to have awesome guests and I get to learn a lot from these, and hopefully you do as well. My guest today is Dorone Paris, and she is now in what city? Welcome, Dorone.
Oh, thanks so much, Tigran. I'm at the moment in Dublin, in Ireland.
Oh, great! But your background, you're from Israel, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm from Israel.
yeah, and reading about you, it's so fascinating. You went on and have a PhD in music, and you're also very highly active in politics. And Israel is one of those places in the world where there is a lot of politics happening.
Sure is. We're always on the news every day.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've never been, but it's one of those countries that I really would love to visit someday. Tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll let you do PhD studies and what inspired you to do what you do now.
Okay, will do. And also, you're always welcome to Israel. It's not as scary, I suppose, as it seems on the news everywhere else. My background. Well, I grew up just loving music. I suppose my dad plays piano more like as a hobby, so it was always in our kind of family. Grew up with my mom singing all the time, and my older brother plays the piano. So we had the kind of like this music around, and in any school, I don't know, at least in Israel and in other places that I know, I started playing the recorder, and I loved it, So then I developed like that, and I started playing the saxophone, which was and is still my main instrument. And I suppose I was just fascinated by everything that was music. Then I think at the age of 14, I decided that I'm not going to be a vet, which I wanted for my entire life, but I'm going to be a musician. Oh, wow. And so I really kind of went with it the entire way. I switched schools, went to a music school, did everything that people told me not to do. Because this is all I wanted to be. I wanted to work with music. I felt that music saves me. It's a place to release. It's a place to express. It's a place to be yourself. And I went for it. So then obviously went to college, and I did my degree in music and philosophy. I found the music part extremely boring. And I got really stuck into philosophy. And I think that was a really crucial point for me. Because philosophy really took me into the depths of music. So in a way, I kind of rejected all the things we were taught. So it's just a BA, so it's all like introduction, history, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of got me to think more about the philosophical points. I got reading stuff of Adorno, which was obviously touching music as well as philosophy. And from there, I just kind of went a bit more into what philosophy meant. And I think that really shaped the sort of work I do these days. So in the course of philosophy, I really focus on morality and ethics. I went and studied a discipline that is called crazy ethics.
Oh, wow.
So that was a lot of fun. It was taught by Saul Smilansky, who is just a genius, if anyone ever reads his stuff.
Yeah, I have. I was gonna ask about path art, and the crazy thing is that I meet people, and especially in America now, you meet a lot of musicians and artists who talk about politics and music and the frustrations that they might have with politics, but you don't often meet people who are truly dedicated to it. So when I was reading about you, I got on your website, you are truly dedicated to it, and you're actually doing things, not just writing posts on Facebook, but actually doing work that's very important, and not just Facebook posts, because Facebook posts reach a certain amount of your friends, and you might even have 5,000 friends, but that's still limited. The work has to be a little bit more rooted, and that's what you're doing. So what's path art, and just a little bit about that project or any of the other projects that you're involved with?
Absolutely. So as part of all this kind of background I kind of gave you, I went and did, I suppose, some things that were just a bit different. So I got into thinking about morality a lot, about ethics a lot. And around the same time, I met a special friend. And the reason I'm mentioning her is because I think she's really crucial into what path art means. which we're going to talk about in a second. And that woman, this artist, her name is Shahid Zouabi, and she's the same age as me, just that she's from the other side, as we call it in Israel. Okay?
Yeah.
So her identity is supposedly Palestinian identity. I'm saying supposedly because we're forced the identity that we are from the moment we're born into certain families, certain friends, okay? Although in both our minds we're both Israelis, which that's a different issue. Okay, so she kind of made me think about what we are, what are our identities, and we are basically like, I don't know, we were born a few days apart, how our life kind of changed around. And I thought to myself, you know, she is just a proof that the only way we can stop all this bloodshed is by coexisting. Now, everyone says I'm naive because I constantly talk about coexistence. Maybe it's because I'm a woman also. Which is definitely a part of it. I got that a couple of times. But this is truly what I believe in, that coexistence is the only way that we're going to live in peace. And so I decided to make what I do, or the thought that I have, actually a movement, so we can gather more people into it. And I call the movement Path Art. And it all started by me trying to talk about what coexistence means. And I think a part of what it means is actually tackling the things that are the hardest for us. So it's actually criticizing who we are first before we criticize the other side.
Wow.
And that's the thing as well, that is harder for most people. It'll be harder for my family, it'll be harder for my friends, because it comes as if I'm criticizing us. Why am I criticizing us? You know. But I truly believe that any sort of change starts from you, and not from telling the other one you have to change or you have to do.
Exactly.
So that's why I created Path Art. And in Path Art, I put under that wing a lot of projects that I have been doing, and that other artists that I've been working on have been doing. But the idea is that this sort of message will spread. Now, it has been a few years that I've been working with this, and I think it's been amazing. I mean, we don't have a huge following, or a huge bunch of artists that are there. There are only a couple, but I think that that's an achievement.
Yeah, and
but so it's all about changing one heart. And
so, how much of this project, or you think maybe in the future, could get into politics, or is that something you want to stay away from?
That's a great question. I want to stay away from, and then I don't want to stay away from. You know, you want to stay away from politics because it's basically because politics these days are not true politics. They're basically more concerned about the amount of money they're gonna get, or you know, what they can get over other people. If it was true politics, if it was a real democracy, then we could really do more in it, and I would like to be a part of it. So I think also as well, when we talk about politics, there's politics of the government and there's politics of the people. And the politics of the people is where I want to be. Yeah.
You talk about feminism, gender equality. You know, it's one thing. It's so tough in the music world because I meet so many amazing people who maybe seem that they're very open to different culture, different races, different sexes, but in reality maybe they're not. What are your experiences, and is there really equality? Because I meet musicians in the States, and you know, I didn't really live in Europe or in Asia or Middle East, so I don't know that perspective too well, but in the States I meet so many people that say, oh well, you know, I would never discriminate, I would never do this, but then things happen, and what we see, the projects implemented, the concerts, and all these organizations, it's a different picture from when you talk to people. The outcomes are different and unfortunately sad at times. So what's your experience, and what's the reality from your perspective?
Okay, I'll give you the reality and then I'll talk about my experiences. The reality is that these days in Israel, for instance, there's only one professor woman for music. Okay, only one. And in Ireland just now, there was a huge scandal about a famous composer called Siobhan Cleary, who was given a commission which the sum was 20% less than a man that got the same thing a year before, and a man that got the same thing a year before that, etc. So the reality is that there is no equality in the field. In my perspective, I got criticized a lot of my art for being naive, or not thought through, or stuff like that. That is kind of condescending, and how could you think all these things, or you don't know what you're talking about. So the experiences are certainly there. but that's why I think myself and Sylvia Hintz kind of decided to take a bit more action into this and create another movement that I think is very important. And we called it Art Equality, which at the moment is just an online movement. Okay, which we're hoping to expand, obviously, not only to be online, but I think we're most active online because it's just easier and we can speak to women and men around the world rather than going around and trying to see what's going on. And in this movement, we're basically trying to put women in the forefront for a change. For instance, we try to introduce a new artist, a new composer, a new writer, female, obviously every Wednesday to the public, in case no one knows about them. Or in case you do know about them, but we want kind of like the mainstream media to kind of get those names a bit more. And we have every day a new She Rose hero. We post about. And I think that's kind of like where we're bringing our activism at the moment to try and just expand that idea, because we've both seen, and I'm sure Sylvia already said that, we've both seen discrimination because of our gender. When it comes to music, obviously, in arts in general, that's the way it is.
And for those who don't know, Sylvia Hintz is absolutely fantastic. I had the honor of having her on the podcast, and I'm happy you heard about this through her, and we're doing it now. But one thing is the online sphere that you mentioned, and online is actually in today's world very important, because some people might say, oh, online, you definitely should have something in person, but I think you could even get so much done online, because everyone's online now. I feel like more people are online than in person now. It's
absolutely
in some ways unfortunate, but in some ways it's very helpful, because you get to work from different parts of the world and connect with so many people, and that's what this podcast has done for me, connect with you and others who I might not ever in my life meet, although I hope I meet you someday, but we might never meet in person. But it's great that we connected this way. A little bit about your compositional work. You know, it's great, the politics and activism that you're doing, but also I want to hear about your work. What do you do as a composer, and what are some recent or upcoming projects?
So as a composer, I write political music, so I call myself a political composer, because I feel like everything I do, it comes from the place of I want to make a change. I want to make this world a bit better. And so I want people to engage with it, because I think we all live in this world and we should engage with what we're going through. So that's kind of like the general idea. The latest piece I did before what I'm working on at the moment was called Shelter. And we actually performed it only once in Yafo, Tel Aviv. Yafo is the southern part of Tel Aviv in Israel. And it was a collaboration piece with Shahid Zouabi, which I mentioned earlier, that kind of changed my life. And the reason it was called Shelter is because we decided to interview the experiences of women in shelters. So since we both live in this land that has a lot of war, we all experience shelters. But until now, what we both found is that when we talk about shelters, we talk about war, we always think of a manly image into it. But we never actually think about what do those women go through, those mothers, those girls just going through this experience. So we decided to interview both sides. And so Shahid went and interviewed Palestinian women who were sitting in shelters during specific wars, attacks, etc. And I tried to interview women on the Israeli side. One of them is my mother, and to know her experience of how it was to sit in a shelter, as a daughter and as a mother. To me, I remember like my earliest experience is sitting in a shelter. So I think that was kind of like a starting point. And so we put these experiences together, and we first of all wanted to show how similar the things are. Not only experiences as an Israeli-Palestinian, but also the similarity of the experience as women of what we go through, the longing for the man to come and comfort, etc. And we thought that would be really important. So we had all these recordings. I worked as well with a saxophone trio to make kind of like the sound for this. We had two aspects. We had a big projector that was actually translating the words. Either if it was in Hebrew, it was translating to Arabic, and if it was in Arabic, translated to Hebrew, so everyone will understand. And Shahid, in the meantime, during this piece, was about 13 minutes long, was actually trying to put everyone into a shelter. So she was going slowly with the masking tape, big tape. And the reason, again, we chose the tape is because this is what you put on the windows when there's war. Wow. So the windows won't explode, so we thought that would be very powerful. And you're going to try to gather everyone in. We only have photos of this online, because to document a thing like that, we just figured it out, that all these pieces are so heavy performance-wise that you just can't document them right unless you have a team of cameras. So I think the photos do a good job of it. And I think that was very successful. People felt the longing inside a shelter, the fear, and the comfort. And I think they could really see themselves a part of it. That's at least the responses that we got afterwards, which was great. And I think that's really important as well when you build a piece, to see who feels what, and if you were able to portray some sort of feeling for them to empathize with or to relate to in some way. So that was my latest project. And at the moment I'm working on something that I prefer not to mention, just because from my experiences, if I say things too early, different governments can stop what I'm doing. I just don't want to.
Especially in today's world with everything going around real quick.
Absolutely. In a minute, everything is, you're not allowed to. Even in this piece, we had a lot of censorship. We weren't allowed to put some of these interviews. I had to have a blank space. So obviously use censorship as part of the piece. And put strong beeps and stuff like that. I mean, there's only a way in which they can stop us from talking. And I think we should actually take advantage of it, They say you're not allowed to say, you're not allowed to do that. Use that in a piece. At least that's the way I found out of it. Yeah.
Well, based on everything you said, what do you say to people who are afraid to speak out? Because you're not afraid to speak out. What suggestion would you give or advice?
Well, speak out. I think there's a few ways to speak out, first of all. There's a one-on-one speak out. I'm not the best in it. I mean, I do when I feel comfortable. I don't when I don't. And that's fine. Because people, especially these days, especially from where I'm from, are very confrontational. Okay? And it's about who raises his voice louder. So, I mean, don't really have to. So this is one way to speak out. There's another way, which is social media. Again, depends who you have. It depends if you want to be heard, not be heard. That's fine. If you're an artist, there's plenty of ways to express it. And even if you can't talk, I think that's okay. I think we're built with so many fears throughout our lives that I cannot judge anyone for not speaking. The only thing I will say is that you always have to try to be right. You have to try to do good in this world. Whether you can speak it or not, just try to do the best you can to make this better.
What's, Israelis and Palestinians, the conflict has just been there for so long. What do you see with the new generation? Is there more hope with the new generation, or do you still see a lot of conflicts?
It's a hard one to analyze, but maybe I can give you just an example of an experience. Maybe that will be an analysis. We did in 2015, another piece I done with Chad Zuabi was called Mirror. And we had these huge mirrors that we placed in the old city of Jerusalem. And there was it was actually a 30-minute piece, and it was talking about basically all the identity crisis, the way we're forced to be a specific identity, and all we want to do is live. And Shahid was then smashing the mirrors, etc. So it was very emotional. There was a lot as well of religious chanting, whether Muslim or Jewish or even Christian. There was just everything kind of there. We kind of tried to bring all this, the reason we're fighting together, and put this in Jerusalem, which is probably the center of heat. And we were ready for the worst responses in the world. But what happened there was absolutely amazing. We had young people coming and saying, wow, I actually felt something. You made me think of something else. When are you doing this again? Wow. Those were the responses. And we were like, this is shocking, this is not easy and to listen to or to think or want to be. And Jerusalem with all the bloodshed here. We're like, wow, we took this really strong and we were really motivated. Then we had the same show again in a different location in Haifa, which is up north. and we had it in it's called a Jewish Arab Center. So it's supposed to be more coexistence kind of place. And it's more like an art center, I suppose. And people knew about this show in advance, and people came prepared. And what we got there was just an attack on our friendship. We were told that we do not have true friendship. We do not know what coexistence is. And we're just basically being naive again.
Wow.
We're saying that.
Wow.
Okay? And that's same generation.
Wow.
So I'm not sure, to answer your question.
Yeah, that's...
I'm not sure where we are. But those single people, those single, I suppose, lights of hope that we did meet in the most heated city in the world, probably, you can't forget that. I think that's hope.
Hope that the future will bring a lot more peace than where we are now. And it's crazy that there's so many parts of the world, and it's not just Israel and Palestinian conflict. There's so many conflicts around the world, and hopefully there are more projects like this that will kind of inspire and educate the future generations, because I think that should be the goal. Do you know anything about, or maybe you do, the WestEastern Divan Orchestra?
No. Tell me about it.
Well, this is a project that Daniel Barenboim started, and it's a very in some ways similar to what you're doing, but he tried to unite people and bring everyone together to make an orchestra. And there's actually a really interesting documentary. It's on YouTube. I think I saw it a couple of years ago. It should still be up there. And it's just an orchestra that brings together people from Israel, Palestine, Egypt, different regions around, and connects people through music, and has them collaborate together in one setting. It's similar and different in some ways from what you're doing, but I think it's equally fascinating, and it's a great project.
Absolutely, sounds great.
I was gonna ask you about when you actually moved to Ireland, and why, maybe if it's not a secret, why did you move, or why did your parents move, or how that whole story happened?
Okay, my parents didn't move. My parents live in Israel.
Okay.
Yeah. I moved to do my master's degree in England, and that's where I met my partner, who is Irish. And then I need to do a PhD. I wanted to continue. Basically, the master's kind of opened my mind to something else. I finally found, I almost did not continue with music because I found it really boring in my first degree.
Wow.
I almost continued to philosophy, and then last second I said maybe I should give it another try, because this is what I wanted to do my entire life.
Wow.
And so the master's degree really kind of opened my mind into political music. That's where I heard first of Gerhard Stabler, which I think he's a political composer. It's how he identifies himself. And I think that kind of triggered me to think what that meant, and take all these thoughts, the philosophical thoughts, into activism. And so I searched for a university that will say, yeah, that is a valid research, or more. I think it's actually also a matter of bureaucracy. A university that won't be afraid to say, we're doing a research into politics, which means that we're going to talk about stuff the universities do not want to talk about, because they want to be neutral.
Yeah.
So it was hard actually to find a place that will say, yes, you can do your PhD in this or the subject. And the one that did say yes was University of Cork in Ireland. And
is that a private college or a university, or public?
No, it's a public. It's a national university.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was delighted. That was an amazing experience.
It's always great to see that the public universities are open to new things, because with private universities, specifically in the U.S., since they're private, they have a little bit more opportunity for movement, or doing things that are unusual or maybe never done before. With public universities, there's just so much politics in every little step, so it's just ridiculous and tough. You have so much passion for philosophy, art, and music, and activism. What inspires you?
This world, I suppose. I think it's just the idea of having to contribute somehow for this world to be a bit better. I think I'm just frustrated. I love Israel, and it's just hard for me when things are going so badly. I really do. And then as well, when seeing injustice seeing half of our society being discriminated, and this time I'm a part of it.
Yeah.
And and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I feel like I'm the majority, not the minority. So perhaps I'm not feeling really everything, but and everything that has to do with gender equality, I'm certainly in the discriminated part. So I think it's just about injustice. I think that's what drives me. I just want to make this world better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With your passion and education and experiences, any chance for a move back to Israel and really help shape the community and culture there with your expertise?
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. Well, I'd really love to do half and half.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like live there half of my time here. And the true reason for that is that Israel is very intense.
Yeah.
It's there's always something, and I think it just kind of sinks you in. There's this thing in Israel in which there's news every hour. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Like a lot of places in the world, but here in Israel, you actually listen to it. At 8 p.m., everyone opens their TV to watch the news.
Uh-huh.
And there's this intensity that your entire life becomes this constant news that they are telling you.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's a place that takes your breath away.
Uh-huh.
And I felt for many years I could just not create. I need to take everything, and I need my place to breathe so I can create, so I can help. I need to breathe, basically.
But you need to breathe, but at the same time, all those experiences have made you who you are. So that was maybe a negative thing, but turned out to be positive in some weird way, and
definitely
contributed to you. As you mentioned, every Wednesday, your project, you guys talk about artists and women that are not really heard or listened to or unknown to the public, maybe. But since this is sort of a musical program, although we talk about all the different arts, if you were to think, maybe 5 or so, and it's probably tough, but 5 composers, women composers that come to mind that you've listened to recently that you would recommend to a listener that doesn't know much about women composers.
Wow, that's a tough one. I'm scared that won't say the right thing. Well, semi-famous, I can talk about Alice Coltrane. Mm-hmm. Who is the wife of John Coltrane. Mm-hmm. And I think she's semi-famous because I think she made like a good career for herself at the end, though. She was regarded as the wife of John Coltrane. Yeah. And whoever doesn't know her, look her up. Like, she was one of the most amazing harpists in the world, probably.
Wow.
She played with Pharoah Sanders and all that bunch of amazing people, and I just can't recommend her more.
Yeah.
So go and listen. Who else? I'm trying to think of someone who isn't that famous. Maybe I'll just start with just my list of great women.
Yeah.
A bit less famous. Okay, let's go with Miriam Blau, who's Canadian, and she did this great installation, I think 2 years ago, called Soft Revolvers. Really cool. Like, I don't know even how to describe her, but except that she is a digital media artist, I suppose. Using all these kind of things together. Then you have Karoli Schneeman, who's just such an amazing persona, such an amazing artist. One of her biggest pieces, I suppose, 1965, was Viet Flakes, when she talks against the Vietnamese War. She's a political composer, as it is, political artist, and really kind of brought all these videos that were shown in the news as things that the American population should say it's great, as horrible. Sorry, I don't think I made myself clear. But she took things that were supposed to be admired and showed the true face, or the way the Vietnamese saw those events, and I thought it was just fantastic. Then you have Herndon, Holly Herndon is just really popular right now with everything she does, so I don't think I need to say much more. And I think I reached 5. Did I reach 5? I think I did.
I don't know, but...
And obviously Eliane Radigue, whoever doesn't know her, look her up, one of the best composer said.
I was gonna say, you know, we talked about it, and I know I'll have some listeners that would say, you know, maybe I wasn't clear about certain things, but I want to make sure I'm clear and make sure I get the point across. What does it mean to be a political composer?
Okay, so a political composer. I think it's a very individual way of defining herself, first of all. So probably different people will say it's a different thing. Mm-hmm. For me, it's about having your art be not only an art form, mm-hmm. but an activist form. Mm-hmm. For me, I call myself political composer because I don't think of my art, my music is necessarily just music, but I think it's art in general. It's an art I put together. It's about having an art view or an art movement that aims to present and discuss social political situations. And for me specifically, it's about focusing on communicating a specific message to my audiences. Not necessarily telling them what I want them to think or feel, but just to evoke certain emotions in them so they can think or rethink social norms that they were brought up thinking. That's why I think it's the definition of political music to me, political art.
So outside of music, this is one of my favorite parts. What do you do outside of music?
I like taking care of different creatures of the world, because I think they're fascinating. We saved 2 cats and 5 hens from the egg industry, I suppose. We're thinking about adopting a male goat because of the dairy industry. I really like animals. And any sort of idea. Any sort of animals like that. Well, no. I suppose that kind of led me into more specializing into vegan and vegetarian cooking and stuff like this.
That must be tough, because every time I've tried, I felt like I need more time to do that, because it's more of a thought process to do it, because we grew up so much about, you know, and I don't know, maybe you're different, but I grew up, you know, eating meat so much that I just, it's so tough to somehow do the vegetarian cooking. How have you kind of been able to do that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think it was much easier for me because the Israeli cuisine, much of it is vegetarian. So the hummus and falafel and all these things are actually vegan.
Yeah.
So it's great, and I think that that was an eye-opening that you can have a main meal with no meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, like thinking about my partner, he'd be like, "Oh, that's so weird. So, like, how can you not have that?" But I think if you grow up in that way, then you kind of get those certain flavors, and I think then it becomes some sort of like a science. Like I do really enjoy food. So each time, like I got a lot into Indian cooking lately as well, because you know all their vegan/vegetarian cuisine is huge. So once you start combining those sort of things together with what the Western world has to offer, then I think there's a lot of interesting stuff coming through it. Yeah.
So anything that we missed that you want to talk about? We've been going at this for about 35 minutes now, so it's been a great chat. Anything that we've missed that you want to talk about? I'm sure there's a lot, but if there's something that comes to mind.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's the end of the day. I can't really think about it. I think the main things were covered.
There was something else I read in your bio about being a composer in residence at Folcam. Tell us maybe a little bit more about that to finish off.
Sure. Folcam is a group that we created when I did my master's. It was actually created before me, and it was just about, I suppose, lifting up composers to young composers. So the idea of it was just to give a better stage to composers that were never heard of before, which was great organization. So obviously joined the organization, and then I became one of the composers and the residents there. It was just about lifting each other, which was really nice. Like it was a bit like a socialist idea, I suppose. As a student, you know that you need that place, because we were surrounded by a lot of lecturers, a lot of professors who kind of were very well established, and so everything we tried to do was never heard. And I think it was as well very much expected of us to be for our sound to sound like them. So it was really a place for us to create more be more of create kind of like our own type of music without someone telling us or being on our head that this is how we should do. And especially because of me focusing on politics, political music is something that was not want to be heard. It was a great residency.
Yeah.
And
speaking about that made me realize, there's I always have these guests and they say, the music education, especially in the States, is just not a very high level, or it's at a high level, but in the 21st century it doesn't incorporate a lot of the different things that we would want to educate the new generation with. How is it in Ireland? How is it in Israel? You've done like 3-4 degrees. If you were the dean of a college department of music, you're the boss, what would you change, if anything?
Oh God, now I'm gonna really criticize all of them. Unfortunately, I even see it these days. I think the problem is that most of the resources, most of the financial side of things go to musicologists. And I'm sorry to all the musicologists who are listening or will be listening. But it's very nice that all the money goes to someone who talks about someone else.
Yeah.
Where are all the creative people? I mean, we got into art, we got into music for create, we got into it to conduct, we got into it to perform, we got into it to compose. Yeah. Why is all the money going for someone who's going to talk about them?
Yeah.
That's my biggest criticism. Really sorry if I'm hurting anyone, but this is the way it is. For us to be funded these days, I don't know how it is in the States. Composers, hard to get funding. Performers, hard to get funding. Conductors, hard to get funding. You want to do a degree, it's on you.
Yeah.
And this is, I had to pay my way through, the academia. All the funding goes somewhere.
Yeah.
I think there's a problem there in the education system. I mean, we are educating a creative discipline to be not creative.
Yeah. That's very well put. I was going to ask, so you also teach, right? You're a teacher.
Yeah.
You teach undergraduate and graduate students at the college. So how's that experience? Do you do it because you have to, or do you do it because you actually enjoy it? What's your experience like?
I also teach saxophone privately.
Oh, wow.
And I just want to put that there because it's hard to be a musician, and there's no work as a musician.
Yeah.
And I think what's amazing with working with, first, one-on-one saxophone students, secondly, undergrad and graduate, is that you just feel inspired all the time. I do, at least.
Yeah.
People are so different, we all come from such different backgrounds, and we're creative in such a different way. Like, our brain works just differently, that everything that comes out is just so inspiring to me. So I enjoy it immensely. No, it's not something that I have to do.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I'm grateful that I have work.
Yeah.
Especially seeing everyone else. I love it. I think it's wonderful. My mission as a teacher is to encourage that creativity, because it's something that the world is always trying to take away from us.
Yeah, and educating is so important. The future generations are absolutely so important for not only the survival of our art field, but also the growth. We just need to inspire the next generation to really get to the next level. And I was going to say, saxophone in the States is so much considered a jazz instrument. I'm sure in Europe and Asia as well. But in Europe, saxophone is also a classical instrument.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was going to say, was that classical your background as a saxophone player or as a jazz player? Or both?
Okay, that's a great question. So I studied saxophone, obviously, as a young girl in Israel. Mm-hmm. Israel is the Israeli society is created from a lot of immigrants from all around the world. So my saxophone teacher was Russian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which was very common, actually. A lot of the music teachers were actually Russian, because obviously they came from that education. Yeah. So I studied classical saxophone, and then I really didn't want to study that anymore. So I switched to study jazz saxophone with another Russian teacher. So all the sides of that society. Yeah, and I continued with jazz. Jazz is definitely my love.
Okay.
Crazy listening. Yeah.
No, it's been great. I loved our conversation. Hopefully someday I'll be in Israel. I know there's an Armenian quarter there in Jerusalem that I want to definitely visit someday. But
you have, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Yeah. So hopefully someday I'll get to that part of the world. I've never been. so many great musicians from that part of the world, and such a crazy history. It's so hard to even talk about the history because there's just so many layers and so much happening, and so that's why I was thinking about our conversation, and I had all these questions, and then I kind of threw it away because I just didn't even know where to start, because you start talking about one thing and then a whole new area opens up, and you might talk about that for like 5 hours, and then you talk about that, but you've missed a whole new other topic that you should be talking about, because it has such a long history, and it's just it's crazy and intense. But it's been great speaking with you.
And with you too.
I was gonna ask you again before we leave, but anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No. I'm sorry I'm not talking about my next piece, but it's...
The next piece we'll talk about after you're done.
Well, yeah, it's just because it concerns the tyrants that we have at the moment in the world. So I can't really speak of them until it happens.
Yeah.
No, I think it's... otherwise I'll start for 5 hours. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
No, I definitely, please let me know whenever you want to come on anytime. And now I'll try to be a little bit more active. I had to take a break because when I started this thing, it was just so intense for about 4 or 5 months. And I had like close to 70 people that I had on, and then I just had to take a break. So I'm back at it, and hopefully we'll have you back on.
You're doing such a great job. I mean, it's amazing you have this basically database, of all these musicians.
Yeah, and now you're on there, so it's been awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Enjoy Armenia, who has an amazing history as well.
Thank you. It's going to be great. I'm very excited for that. Maybe I'll even do a podcast there with someone.
That'll be wonderful.
Yeah.
I really would. One of those places that I really want to visit is Armenia. I always wanted to.
Well, someday that will happen as well. Maybe your music will be performed there. That'll be awesome.
That will be fun. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Tigran.
Thank you.
You too.